Tommy Panos, welcome again, mate. Once again, and by the way, I have to thank you for the number of times you've been on. Back to Property Insights, YBR's Property Insights. Now, of course, we're talking to lots of brokers, mortgage brokers, and anybody else, for that matter, who wants to listen to the show. And the whole content or topic here is about real estate market. And I said when I was introducing you a little bit outside to Rick Grossman, the bass guitarist from the Hoodoo Gurus, and once upon a time the Divinals, I said, this is Tommy Panos, in my opinion, one of the greatest real estate agents in Australia. And I still believe that.
Thank you.
And there's a whole lot of reasons I say that too. It's not based on volumes and stuff like that. I'm talking about your character and your personality, but also your insights. And this is about insights, mate. We'll quickly talk about the federal budget. We'll talk about interest rates a little bit straight after that. But I want to get from you, since we last met, what is your sense of the market? So when we last met, your sense of the market was then is that things were pretty tough and starting to show signs of weakness. And I do remember you saying that this was the beginning of this calendar year, that the number of properties coming onto the market was looking like it was starting to increase relative to previous periods. And that did actually happen, but unfortunately house prices still went up. But at least the number of properties coming to the market are starting to increase. Now we're in a sustained interest rate period. What are you seeing there? What's striking you at the moment?
So, Mark, it's very clear. I'm not just saying it. 100 agents I've spoken to in recent times have said the same thing. We had a little bit of a mini boom for a few months. There was a heap of stock, but if you remember, the sentiment and the mood was the next move of rates is going to be down. The talk was that's the end of the rate rises. And there was a lot of listings that had come on the market, and surprisingly, Mark, the buyers absorbed the stock. So we ended up, seeing decent price growth in that February, March. Everyone tried to put their properties on the market before Anzac Day, school holidays, that, Easter period. But it's changed. It's changed. So the narrative now is, hey, maybe rates aren't coming down anytime soon. There are some saying they might even go up. And I've already seen that filter through into the marketplace. Buyers are cagier than ever.
So when that happens, let's just talk about it from the vendor's point of view. Because, you talk to a lot of agents. You help agents learn how to sell property, how to become good agents. You talk to all the gun agents. They rely on stock. They can be as good as you want them to be, but if they've got nothing to sell, they're in trouble.
Correct.
So what is it that encourages a vendor to put a property in the market, apart from the fact that they might have to, they're struggling? So, I guess there's two parts, isn't there? There's the struggling times and then there's the good times. So what encourages a vendor to put a property in the market?
Okay, so basically they either have to or they want to. Have to is that it's got to the stage where cash flows become an issue and they can see that there's problems coming along, so they want to put their property on the market and change their financial position, release that asset.
And release the debt.
And release the debt. That's the prime driver of that decision. Then you've got those that don't have to but want to. And what drives them? If there's a lot of stock on the market and they can upgrade to something, that's a reason for them to do it.
So the upgraders.
Upgraders.
And downgraders too.
And downgraders. But
downsizers, I would call them.
Downsize is a better word, but that's the point. The point is there something to go to? So they won't put their home on the market if they can't see a lot of stock on the market. So stock brings stock in real estate.
Right.
Right? And at the moment, there's not a hell of a lot to pick from. So what are the other reasons why people are actually putting properties on the can I just stop you there for a second? Because do you think, Tom, the dynamic's going to change? Do you think we're getting into that period now because we think there might be an interest rate increase? Or alternatively, one thing is for sure, interest rates are going to be high for a longer period of time. Whether they go up or not, it's another matter. Do you think we're getting to that point where people go, fuck, I give up? Maybe they didn't put it on the market before because they thought, there's going to be a change. The rates are going to start coming off. We're all talking about rates coming off in July, August, September this year. It's probably not going to happen now. Do you think those people will start to think, oh, fuck, I can't hold on any longer and I can't pay this high variable rate anymore? Yeah, I think, and I know that for a fact because I've spoken to quite a few vendors that are in that position, they were happy because they saw some light at the end of the tunnel. They thought, okay, my repayments are going up every month and all of a sudden,
hey, it looks like that's the end of it. But they were devastated with not the rates haven't gone up, but it's the narrative that is announced with the rates, which I know that you talk a lot on the day of interest rate announcement. You always talk about what is the commentary that they basically said. And that's devastated a lot of owners because now they're thinking to themselves, I can hang on at this level, but for how much longer, and what if they go up? And that will be a trigger for properties coming on the market for a cohort of vendors.
Do you think we're sort of getting close to that sort of mindset now? Because, I mean, a lot of people will be saying if they've been paying high interest rates for a long period of time, and like seriously, 18 months is a long time. High interest rates for 18 months. If we've got another 12 months to go, that could be a killer for some people, and because generally the cost of living has gone up everywhere. Wages haven't really gone up that much. Do you talk to vendors, and do you know agents that are talking to vendors where the vendors are just about to throw in the towel?
Yes. So I speak to two sorts of vendors. One set of vendors have got very little debt on their property, and they also seem to have cash in the bank. And if anything, they're probably not wanting rates to go down, right? Because they're receiving 5-6% guaranteed cash in bank, right? But then you've got that other group and the vulnerable group. So it's interesting because in my auction life, I live in two worlds. I live in the east and the inner west in the first half of the day, and I live out west in the second half of the day, all the way from Greenacre to St Mary's. And you've got people there. You can see it, Mark, when just before the auction, the vendors often body signals like their lips are shaking because you can tell that this is a financially distressed decision that they're making. And how I know it is in one market, I'll get an offer where there's no mortgages and they'll just say to me, listen, we want a little bit more. We'll hang on, we'll keep it. Out west, they'll say to me, it's devastating, but we've got no choice. Just sell it, right? So I am seeing it.
Parallel markets.
Yes, I am seeing
that's
it.
terrible.
And it's, look, you come from that background and you know that the monthly salary is allocated. Like there is not a lot of margin in a lot of the people's lives when they're earning, less than $100,000 a year, right? So
and it's getting less and less things that they can give up paying for too, because a lot of them actually already given up a whole lot of stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, it was interesting. I was sitting at a cafe, Travertino's at Warrimba the other day, and I haven't seen it for ages. Someone ordered an omelette and the omelette was cut in half and they shared it with two people. And I said to the owner, are those omelettes for two? He goes, no, they're for one. But he goes, there's a lot more food sharing and a lot less orders being taken in recent months. Small businesses are a very, very good indicator at the temperature and behaviour of people.
Do you ever get confused, though, Tommy? Because I'm a bit confused too, because that is correct. I know of that myself from the mentor business. But then I hear someone like Commonwealth Bank saying that they are seeing an increase, not a decrease, an increase in people paying more off their mortgage than their scheduled repayments require. So they're building up a larger redraw or a larger offset account or reducing the loan at a faster rate than they're required to do. Right now, they have that over their whole portfolio, they are seeing an increase in that activity. Then you and I are hearing exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
It gives you a bit of brain damage, to be honest with you, but I find it really hard to reconcile all this.
Well, so do I, because it stands to reason. Like, let's turn around and forget about what CommBank has said or even what we're saying. Just look at some basic facts. Mark, over since May 22, someone's loan repayment is more or less doubled.
Yeah, sometimes more.
Or even more, double plus. So ask yourself, how could that person be in a position to not only make their mortgage payments, but actually be ahead, which I find difficult. But I also know that there is a cohort of people, And I wouldn't call those people out west. They've probably got mortgages, but they're executives, they're successful people, they run businesses, and you do see success stories in this market there. So I'm sure that when you put all the data in there, you could break it up and look at various sub-markets and say, oh, these people are performing a lot better, they're doing a lot more. And you know as well as I do, Excel sheets, documents, you can construe them and interpret them in many different ways. You've got to really break down to the detail.
So the Reserve Bank, jawbones a bit in that it's sort of their job too, because they don't want us to get carried away. I mean, if they think we all think that interest rates are going to come down, they know what our behavioural response is likely to be. And then we'll go back to our past habits. We go, oh, it's all cool. We just spend up because, we're going to get relief in a couple of months' time. So they jawbone a bit and they sort of say, we're not going to rule anything in and we're not going to rule anything out. That's a pretty scary fucking statement, actually. That's a pretty scary statement, actually. So and people say, oh, the Reserve Bank control these things. Well, they don't actually. They don't actually know what the data is going to tell them and they respond to data. And the data is provided to them by the Australian Bureau of Statistics and they get it every period when the ABS decides to print the data. And then the Reserve Bank looks at the data and says, well, that's where we want it to be or that's not where we want it to be, therefore we'll make a rate decision. So therefore, both you and I, more you, are in a better position to see where the data might end up in an anecdotal sense. You just gave me an example of which is sort of up in the Central Coast. Where do you think, without listening to what the Reserve Bank's got to say and what the Treasurer had to say in the budget, where do you think the interest rates are going? Where does Tommy Panos believe interest rates are going, say, this for the rest of this year? Just your gut feeling.
If I had to go put a bet, my bet would be they're going to stay the same right to the end of this year.
And why do you think the RBA will not change rates until the end of the year? And what is it that do you sense from what they say every 6 weeks these days that sort of convinces you of that? Not a data set, just in terms of rhetoric, etc.
So their commentary, and not the data, their commentary is one. The second thing is that being someone that works in the real estate space, I can actually see what you just indicated before, which is even the slightest sense of optimism, the public go crazy on property again. I see it in the same week that I can tell you, Mark, if next interest rate day, which is it next month or
so we just had one.
The following Saturday, there would be significantly more people visiting open homes and there'd be significantly more people going above the original number they were going to bid. So
are they that tuned in?
It is so bizarre, Mark. The response seems to happen instantaneously, right? So decision on a Tuesday, then on the Saturday we see it. And for me as an auctioneer, it's frustrating because when they were saying, hey, rates aren't going up, rates are probably going to go down, I would have vendors that would give me their reserves and it would say 1.5 million, it had been crossed out at the last minute and they'd put 1.6 and I'd say to them, why'd you do that? Oh, the market's going to go up now, their rates aren't going down. So it's this. And believe it or not, people say don't listen to the media, but I'm absolutely convinced. And even in my time working as an exec at News Corp, I believe whether it's the Fin Review or any of the other publications, I think the public of Australia do make decisions based on what's coming through both traditional media and social media, and they respond very, very quickly to those news.
So they're sort of glued to the news. I mean, in some respects, whatever their source of that news is. And probably even to a greater extent, we've all become experts. I mean, and
and I probably know a lot about this territory, but I'll be the first to say I don't think there is any such thing as an expert on interest rates, because because interest rates are a function of inflation, and there's absolutely no expert on inflation, because inflation is just one number, which is the confluence of demand and supply, and demand and supply is a behavioural thing. So I demand these products because that's how I decide I'm going to behave with the money that I've earned. I'm going to behave a certain way. I might want to go to a concert. I might decide I want to go on to dinner. I might not want to go to that restaurant anymore. If there's a new restaurant up the road, I want to go and try that. I don't give a shit how much it's going to cost. Or alternatively, I want to share my omelette with my partner here because we can only afford half each. So no one knows how my behaviour and therefore everyone else's behaviour is going to change is going to change. So therefore, no one's an expert. We have to wait for the event to occur. We have to wait for people to actually behave a certain way. And then we say, oh, shit, they're behaving in a very, they're not very thrifty. They're spending money like drunken sailors. So we, the Reserve Bank, will have to clonk them on the head and we'll put the rates up. Warren Hogan, who's the chief economist from Judo Bank, recently came out and said he thinks with the tax cuts, which are going to happen 1 July, and a few other things that the government did with the recent budget, that we are likely to have, in his opinion, 2 rate rises this year.
Right.
What do you think? He's a bit out there. He's a bit of an outlier on that regard, but still he's saying it, and he's an ex-Reserve Bank guy. I don't think he's doing it just for to showcase his business or himself. I think he means it. What do you think would happen if we had 2 rate rises or a rate rise?
Okay. If we had 1 rate rise or 2 rate rises or even 3 for that matter, what I think you will see is more vendors will come onto the market because they have to.
Not exactly a distress sale, but I just want to get rid of this bogeyman.
So what they're doing is, it's not like they can't afford the loan repayments that month, but what they've done is they've hung on and they're thinking, it's going to look messy in December. Let's make a decision to put it on now. I think what will happen is buyers will actually, 2 things will happen with buyers. And believe it or not, one of them is positive, because buyers have a loan that they've got to use by a specific time.
Yeah, because they've got a pre-approval for a couple of months.
Correct. So what I notice, and if I ever want to try to nudge a sale over the line, I will remind a buyer that I'm negotiating with. I'll say, listen, we're 20 grand short on an offer and acceptance. You own 98% of the house already. I say that, make them feel like they own it. And I need you to know that if you choose not to buy this, I'd like you to go and have a look at the paperwork that says how long your pre-approval is for, because every week I hear of buyers that get their amount realigned, and that means you might not be able to buy this property even if you want to. It won't be an option. So it will actually help nudge a few sales there, but ultimately it will make the buyers cagier, nervous, and I think what you will see is price drops in certain markets, not in units and not in the high end, because we have a shortage of those 2 pieces of commodity at the moment. Yeah. So Mark, when I say units, I'm not talking about the units at Rhodes or the units in a big block of 1,000 units at Mascot. I'm talking about there's a group of people that cannot buy a house. Developers have decided, mate, we're not competing in this market. So development, new properties being developed is at an all-time low. In fact, there was an article yesterday that said we have not had so less new homes built for over, I think, a decade, right? And they're not developers don't want to go in when you've got inflation and high interest rates. The deal's got to stack up for them. And then you've got these other red tape bureaucracies in New South Wales. All the developers hate the commissioner because he slows things down and what have you. So this short supply of units being built, and Harry Triguboff has basically said in the last 2 days, he is reducing the amount of units he's going to be building. He reckons there's no money in the deal at the moment. So I think units are a good property to buy because there's a shortage of them. And 3-bedroom units, Mark, because a 3-bedroom unit can accommodate a family.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like there's a bit of a shortage of 3 and dare I say 4-bedroom units.
Yeah.
Like if you had a 4-bedroom unit, so I saw our mates from R&W, Elizabeth Bay, recently sold a 4-bedroom unit in Potts Point. Like it wasn't like, it was a good unit, good size, couple hundred square meters. Like 7.8 million or something like what the hell's and
Was that Jason Boone?
it was Booney, yeah. So maybe help me out here. Is that a downsizer buying that apartment? Do you think? I mean, is there a lot of that going on? Like I've got the big expensive house for 20 million or something. I own Rose Bay. I don't care then how much I pay. I got paid 10 million because I still got 10 million spare. Is that what's going on?
So it's not, Mark. Normally it's not 20 to go to 5 million. It's more like 10 to go to 5 million.
Right.
100%. So you're 65, 75. You've got a 800 square metre block in the suburbs, nice home. You're getting tired of the maintenance of the property and you're starting to think to yourself, shit, I've got my 2 kids here. They're renting. Maybe I should sell, downsize, have a bit of money, bit of travel, give the kids a bit of money. Because Mark, I've got to tell you, as an auctioneer now, every Saturday, all I'm looking at the registered bidder with a paddle, and all I'm looking at is mum or dad next to them, right?
Oh, right.
That's what I'm looking at, right? Because they're your buyer. They're your buyer in 2024.
My bank of mum and dad.
Mum and dad. And it's interesting, because I actually, that's another minefield that we can discuss one day, because we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of parents now tipping in. And I overheard someone say to one at an auction, he goes, well, at some time you're going to have to make the decision not to be a parent because you don't know how long you're going to live for. Like if you live to 90, 95 and you think to yourself, I've got this 3 million that has come through after I've sold my house and downsized.
You're going to need it.
You might need it because unfortunately, no one knows the exit date on the planet, and you can't really turn around and say, well, there's enough for the next 17 years. So that is a very, very big thing at the moment, Mark. The parents helping, and you've got to also look at how they help. Sometimes they help by a gift. Sometimes they help by a loan. Yeah. Right? And the loan's an interesting one because there are, when you lend money out, I think the rule is if you haven't collected it back 6 years from when you give it back, legally, you're not entitled to get it back.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
So, well, then, Tom, help me with this. Who buys the $10 million property in the example you just gave? So I'm trying to work out where all these buyers are coming from. So you've explained to me where these young people, they're buyers and where they're getting their deposit from. And you've explained to me the downsizers, they're buying the $5 million apartment, for example. They maybe buy a 4-bedroom place because they want to put a room for the grandkid and a study, and they got the money to do it because they just sold a $10 million house. Who's buying the $10 million house? Where are they coming from?
Okay, so let me think about some example. Okay, there's one in Kingsley Street, Byron, where I am. Once just sold there last week for I think 8.5, and I asked the agent, like, who buys a house for 8.5 there, and he said a guy that runs a business, I think in Melbourne, that's going gangbusters. So normally, who buys it? People who've got businesses that have been COVID benefiters, those kind of businesses,
especially digital ones who do
100%. I think this guy's a digital one. Yep. I think this guy's a digital one, tech type business. They're buying homes. The other people that are buying homes are people that had a home that was worth 4 million. It's gone up to 7 million, and then they can go buy one for 10 million. So you're getting the person which is the next step up.
Right. So they're upgrading.
Yes.
You got your upgraders.
Yeah.
And I guess there's probably not that many properties for sale in that category anyway. I mean, there's some, but not that many. So it doesn't really need so many individuals who are the buyers. You only need one buyer. Yeah, that's what you need.
Well, that's why the prestige market, Mark, has been so resilient and has gone gangbusters, it's because the supply has been limited. And then you've had the combination of these digital tech entrepreneurs. You've had the expats that came back to Australia during COVID. They came back with money. And then you've got the other people that already had their home paid off. It went up 30, 40, 50%. They can then go to the next level. But there's only a limited supply. So that market has stayed resilient. That's not the case when you see a property that can be replicated 100 times over. When you go in and look at, standard 3-bedroom semi or 2-bedroom unit, lock-up garage.
500 square metres.
500 square metres, right? There's an abundance of those, right?
So they're not having the same knock-on effect. Correct. So what I'm talking about then is probably more the exception than the rule.
Correct.
So if I go out some places like where I grew up, probably more than likely, some of those people are not seeing the rivers of gold that the house in Mossman's seeing, or the apartment in Potts Point that Booney's selling is seeing.
No.
Because Booney, Potts Point's only this big.
No.
And Mossman's only that big. And there's only so many houses there because they're on bigger lots or the apartment buildings. So whereas if you go out in other areas where I grew up, there's a shitload of houses out there, and they're just one after the other.
But that's a good topic to talk about, Mark, because even in those suburbs, you're absolutely spot on. I will add, but there are exceptions to the rule. There are some really wealthy people that have got their ties in that community, whether it's out west in Denham Court. Greenacre, there was a house that's recently been sold. It was an off-market deal at $4.5 million.
Serious?
Like Greenacre. Now, you know Greenacre,
I just saw
Mark.
my first wife lived in Baronia Road, Greenacre.
Have you kept anything in Greenacre?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Well, Greenacre, you've lost money there, Mark, because Greenacre, $4.5 million. And it's very interesting because there's a group of people there. And I'll tell you one thing, you'll see more AMGs going down Waterloo Road, Greenacre, than what you'll probably see in Old Southhead Road, right? There's a group of people that want to be connected to where they've been brought up. They've got successful businesses. And Greenacre is an interesting area because it's got both Islamic and Christian private schools. Yep. So you've got this group of people that want to be there. It's not too far away from Strathfield, which is known as Doctor City. That's where a lot of doctors live.
Is that right?
Yes, they love it there because of the private schools.
Right.
Lots of
and is that because a lot of them are ethnic based, so like Asians? Yeah,
Koreans,
because they love the private school system.
Yes, yeah. So you've got that. So you've got certain pockets where there is still people that are very wealthy, but overall, you are right. A really good stat for someone to look at on whether a suburb's going to take off is income per household.
Right.
It's a great stat. You can see it on various data
Well,
sets.
ABS puts it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll tell you, because that's telling you there's money there. And that money means they can buy there, they can renovate there, and when they renovate, they're not doing $400,000 renovations. They're getting architects design, they're getting designers in. But one thing, Mark, I've got to tell you, it is disheartening, but because I do come like yourself from those areas, right? And I have a lot of people that I've met over the years. If you're a young person now, 20 years of age, and you got no money, and
so you just finished school or uni, and you
finish school,
got
finish
$1,000 in the bank.
Yeah, got $1,000 in the bank. Actually, that's a good number because I reckon that's probably typical.
It's about right. Yeah.
It will take you 20 years to save for a deposit that's going to allow you to comfortably buy a unit in Sydney. Obviously, a little bit less in Melbourne and Brisbane, right? But Sydney, a house, if you're age 20, it'll take you to the age of 60 to actually save for a deposit. This is based on you trying to live normally, right? Mark, back in the old days, that was the goal, to have your home paid off by then, not to be saving for a deposit.
Well, you only borrowed money for 25 years in those days.
Correct.
So you nearly paid off in 20 years. So you probably would be paid off in 20 years.
And I'm seeing it. I mean, it's uncomfortable for me to say it, but I'm seeing, you know who I'm seeing young people buy properties? If their parents are helping them, if they've been really lucky with some sort of business that's gone off.
That's rare.
OnlyFans, believe it or not.
Yeah.
OnlyFans, if they're making 50, 60, 70, 80 grand. I know a few people that I've sold property and the agent has said to me, mate, she's got an OnlyFans account and she's putting it into property.
Is he going to, Tommy, you telling us something? You're going to do an OnlyFans page?
I'm not on OnlyFans. I don't think I do really good on OnlyFans. But
you never know. You never know.
But what I am saying is, isn't it interesting where we are as a society now to achieve the dream that we've always been told, which is probably something else that we need to relook at. Is that the right narrative?
Well, someone asked me the question, the Great Australian Dream, yesterday actually. And I said, well, sort of along the lines that you just described, the Great Australian Dream does exist still because everybody still dreams about owning their own property or having their own property with a mortgage or ultimately without a mortgage. But the only problem is that, it used to be at 23 years of age, the average Australian borrowed money at 23 years of age 15 years ago. Today, the average borrower to buy a property is 32 years of age. So basically they're waiting another 10 years. And if you're starting today, so that's a current statistic, those people would have saved that deposit to buy that house at 32. They would have started back when they're 20. So today, if you start today and you're 20, I think your number's probably right. They're probably it'll be 40 years of age will be the average borrower. And that's when they'll buy their first property. And that's just assuming nothing ridiculous happens. In other words, the supply chain of housing just continues on the same trajectory that it's always done. It doesn't reduce.
Correct.
What I'm worried about at the moment is both the supply of people who need a property has skyrocketed, and this is what immigration is. And I'm not someone to talk against immigration. I'm the product of immigration in this country. But at the same time, I don't want anyone to suffer who currently lives here. And I actually don't want people who come here to suffer as well, because who'd want to be an immigrant turning up to Australia and not being able to rent a property? I mean, like, what the hell?
So Mark, 500,000 people came into Australia last year.
In 2023.
2023. Now, what's concerning is our budget the other night. New South Wales was a loser in that budget.
1.5 billion or something we missed out on.
And the irony of it all is the majority of those migrants are going here.
Right, they're in Sydney.
Yeah. Mate, they're not going to far north Queensland and they're not going in the middle of Australia.
And they're not going to Perth.
And they're not going to Perth, right? So we need to take that into account. That's 500,000 people that are coming in. Now, you talk about, I listened to Chambers talk about, he said something along the lines, our aim is to have 1.2 million new homes in 5 years. Mark, they're so behind the run rate. But he has covered himself, our aim, you know what I mean? And 5 years, there's a probability he's not going to be there in 5 years, And
he won't, and by then he can invent another story if he has to sort of backtrack on that one. He might be hoping to be Prime Minister in 5 years' time. He might have a lot to answer for. I don't have any faith in them whatsoever, Tommy. I don't like any of the policies. I think the policies are overdone, overprotective, in some areas completely underdone. I think they are all, and I was asked to give a commentary on it the other day. I gave him a 9 out of the 10 in terms of navigating the constraints under which he operates. And that, what I mean by that is all the people he's got to please. He's got to please so many people who vote for him and who are influential in them maintaining power. But if I was to give it an economics, Australian overall economic score out of 10, I'd give him 2. But I don't think it achieved anything. I don't think they're doing it. I mean, it would be nice to say, look, we're going to tackle the power bills, electricity bills by a new economic policy and a government policy by bringing in nuclear. We're going to tackle the housing shortage by removing the power of councils to make all the decisions and let's put it in the hands of the state governments or something like a bit like what Chris Minns is trying to do. We need policy change, actual policy change to make things happen. So I'm very disappointed. So and I also think what he's doing is he's potentially adding fuel to inflation. So all the money he's giving away. I mean, do you need $300 that he's giving you for power rebate? Me? I mean, why wouldn't he say to people like you and me and everybody else above us, and quite a few people below us for that matter, you guys aren't getting it.
But what we're going to do is instead of giving $300 to the people who need it, we're going to give them $600.
Yeah.
Well, like, what the hell? Like, that's
Mark, spot on. Listen, I've lost my 300. I got a parking ticket this morning, right? So I've lost my $300, right? And I can tell you, it's neither here nor there, right? But you are 100% right. There is someone that needs that $300 10 times more than other people. But I do think that was a popularity strategy.
it's an election. It's an election budget. This one.
Yeah.
This is. Look. I know in politics, it's not my game, politics, but like, I'd imagine it must be frighteningly difficult to come up with a budget because budgets aren't about economic policy anymore. Budgets are about election policy. You know, I'll give you policies that allow me to get re-elected.
Yeah.
And that's the mandate he has from his party leaders and the power brokers within his party. So I do give him a 9 for that because that's most Australians don't realise that's the regime he works under and all the politicians work under today. We're not talking about the John Howard days, the Paul Keating days where unpopular decisions were made. GST, extraordinarily unpopular. Compulsory superannuation, extraordinarily popular. One of the best things that's ever happened.
Yes.
Compulsory superannuation. GST, fantastic. I mean, why wouldn't, I don't know, we're talking a little bit out of school here, Tommy, but it doesn't matter. Why wouldn't, I'm flabbergasted he didn't get up and say, you know what, we've decided we're not going to put all the pressure on mortgage owners in Australia every time there's an inflation number that we don't like or the Reserve Bank doesn't like. So what we're going to do is instead of putting pressure on the Reserve Bank to put interest rates up, every single time that the inflation number comes out at a number we don't like, and it's not between 2 and 3%, it's 4 or 5, whatever it is, we, the government, is going to increase the GST by 1%. So we're going to take it from 10 to 11.
Yes.
And Reserve Bank, you don't have to do anything.
Yes.
Because we're going to make all Australians pay 10% more for everything they buy.
Yes.
And we're never going to go above 15%. And when the inflation gets back down to where it is and the Reserve Bank, start dropping interest rates, we also will drop the GST. And when Australians behave themselves, we'll be back to 10% GST.
Mark, you totally get it because the tool they're using at the moment is actually in many ways
fueling inflation,
fueling the problem. So it's basically trying to fix something but making it worse.
If you go to the airport, Tommy, everybody looks like you and me. They're all over 50.
Yeah.
They're the only people travelling because they don't have a mortgage or they've got a very small mortgage. Their property's gone up 4 times since 2010. They've got money in the bank. They've got money in the super. They're going, oh, well, let's go on holiday.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the young people aren't travelling.
Yeah.
They are not travelling. And anyone with a mortgage and a family, they are not travelling.
Yeah.
Because they can't fucking afford it.
Yeah.
And, why the government doesn't see this? I mean, please, Treasury, go to the airport. You are, every time you put these rates go up, you are rewarding these people. They have never earned so much interest and they can't spend it.
And all those things that they spend it on drives inflation up. Instead of economy, they fly business. Instead of a 3-star hotel, they go to a 4-star, 5-star.
They go to the restaurants.
They go to the restaurants. They're not going to Uma's up the road. They're going to something that's $300-400.
Yeah.
Right?
And they're looking after them. They spoil themselves. By the way, they deserve to spoil
100%.
themselves. Because they've been, they're not like, super rich people. But to them, it's important they go to Byron Bay or they go to the Gold Coast and they stay in a luxury place. There's a pool. Someone makes a bed every morning. There's a beautiful big buffet breakfast.
Yes.
They say, this is a great spoil. We'll do this for a week.
Yes.
Or 5 days. Then they go back to Sydney. But, mate, that sort of accommodation, and we talk about it, and the Reserve Bank Governor, she keeps talking about it. The Reserve Bank Governor keeps saying it's the services part of the economy or of the basket of goods and services. It's the services part of the economy that is causing us the problem. Accommodation, restaurant, airfares are 3 really big components of the services part of the economy. 3 big rent is another big one. So if we're not building enough houses and we're bringing 500,000 people in here, how can you do one thing? That makes the demand for property higher and higher and higher. If your kids and my kids are trying to rent a property, they're going to have to pay a lot of dough because they're lining up. You've seen it. They line up with 20 people in front of them.
Yes.
So the vendor can ask whatever they want. I saw Anthony Albanese's got a rental property I saw today.
Yeah.
His tenant has received a a notice to leave the premises because
So look, I read the article. I'll look at two sides of it because that tenant, there was a story some time ago, and I'm very certain it was the same tenant. So Albo had reduced the rent on this property. It's in the inner west. By the way, my business partner and I sold Albo's house when we were young kids.
Really?
In that area, Dulwich Hill, Marrickville. So we actually like we're talking 30 years ago. But he had a tenant that he had reduced the rent during COVID, like a lot of landlords had, and hadn't increased the rent. Right. So I think off the top of my head, the rental for this property was under $700 a week. It is actually a very good rent for a tenant, right? He has, according to the article, and according to the agent that's been quoted in the article, has said that he's going to put that property on the market, and that's the reason why
he's getting an eviction notice.
Eviction notice. Now,
but also he could too because the lease is over.
He was on a month-to-month lease, right? So let's be very clear, Albo is not breaking the law. And if anything, he had given that tenant a discount and the rent had not gone up since COVID. But I can see, I come from the world of media and I understand what clickbaiting works like, and it's a free kick, and I totally get it.
But if Albo put up a rent, there would be a line of people for that place.
Oh, absolutely.
20, 30 people, not because it's his house, but the property, because it just says there's such a demand. And we need to solve these problems. To me, they're the fundamental problems that need to be solved. And I actually don't see any government policy, and it's not a state, federal or council, local. There is no policy at the moment to solve the problem. The 1.2 million new dwellings they're talking about, I was at the AFR Property Summit.
Yeah.
I was one of the speakers, and to a T, unanimously, everybody said that we won't make it.
So I think their run rate at the moment for the last year, I think they were supposed to have done, they're less than half.
Yeah.
Right? They're less than half. And that's why I think this time around, people have stopped believing a lot of the things anyway. I mean, you know what it's like, Mark. People were told various things about vaccines. Now there's a change in it. People were told various things about interest rates. Now there's a change in it. So after a while, people are saying, hang on a second.
I don't believe
that. I can't believe that. You've let me down so many times before, right? And I think the view that you're going to have 1.5 million, 1.2 million homes in 5 years, when at the moment, hardly anything's happening, is not that believable. But it's going to need to get addressed, or at least, and I'm like you, migration is a good thing. But what are you going to do if you've got people that are on 150 grand a year that have finished uni, that have got good jobs, that can't rent a property out? They get rejected because there's a line of 40, 50 people for every property, yet we still have people coming into the country and we've got to house them. You've got to turn around and someone's got to have the courage to pull a pen and paper down and say, guys, let's solve the problem. Like in that movie Apollo 13, where at one stage the guy goes, work the problem, let's stop being dramatizing and trying to win a popularity contest. Work the damn problem.
Tommy, as usual, thanks very much, mate. And by the way, I'm going to see you this month.
Yes, you are, Mark.
And what are we doing this month?
You're not going to see me this month. You're going to see me next week.
Next week?
You're going to see me next week.
This month.
So, Mark, we are so pumped. As I said to you, you were our first person to pick. I just said, so I do this event with John McGrath.
This is you and John McGrath, yep.
Eric. And I said to John, I want Mark Bouris booked in, and I want to have this guy closing the conference. So you're closing our 2-day conference.
Thank you.
Just for your own info, Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
He's speaking.
Oh, wow.
So we got good company. Ryan Reynolds, Ryan Serhant, that American real estate agent.
Yep.
So we got some really good people.
It's up on the Gold Coast?
It's on the Gold Coast, and I can tell you it is the biggest business conference in Australasia. It is the biggest.
Is it booked out?
4,000
Wow.
people. You don't get a lot of conferences with 4,000 people.
Totally.
But we've had over the years, Mark, you spoke there before, we've had Donald Trump, last year Reese Witherspoon,
Wow.
Caitlyn Jenner. So we get big quality speakers. And I mean, there's a lot of people that run events and a lot of people go for a cash grab. We've had this event. It's been going for decades. There's no selling on the stages. We basically just want to have a great two-day experience. And I'm so pumped to have you there next Monday.
I'm looking forward to it, mate.
Thank you so much, Mark.
See you, Tommy.